Okay, I can start, introducing the panel now. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Maya Hoyce. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the assistant to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council here at ACM. I will be introducing this year's Pride Month panel, which is named Virtual Realities, How Tech Can Empower the LGBTQ plus community, which centers on the role technology advancements such as VR and the creation of social media platforms have helped queer individuals not only connect with one another, but also assist those looking to discover, explore, and express their sexual and or gender identities. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and feel free to send in Q&As throughout the panel. And for the last 15 minutes of the panel, we will be answering them. And now I'd like to hand off the panel to our moderator and panelists to introduce themselves and to start this discussion.
Great. Thank you. So it's like super excited to be here. So I'm go ahead to introduce myself first, and then I will let the panelists introduce them too. So my name is Guo Freeman. I'm a Dean's Associate Professor in Human-Centered Computing and Director of Gaming and Mediated Experience Lab at Clemson University in the USA. So my research really focuses on how interactive technologies shape interpersonal relationships and group behavior. In the past several years, I have done work on how to design supportive, inclusive and safe social virtual reality and spaces to support and protect marginalized technology users, especially women, minorities and LGBTQ individuals. And I will be the moderator of this panel, and I'm happy to talk more about this topic. And now I think we can move to our panelists. So maybe Michael Ad, you can go ahead.
Absolutely. So hi, I'm Michael Andevito. I'm an assistant professor at Northeastern University in computer science and communication studies, and I direct the socio-technical equity and agency lab here. We focus a lot on how to make socio-technical systems, especially social media systems, safer, more functional, and really more contextual for queer and trans people, with a special focus on trans women and lesbians at the moment.
Great. Maybe Andrea, you can be the next.
Sure. So Andrea Danielescu, I am a director of the Future Technologies R&D group at Accenture Labs. My research spans a number of areas, including gesture and speech interaction, and more recently, emerging technologies like smart materials, energy harvesting and storage, and neuromorphic computing. A lot of what we do spans research and sustainability as well as ethics. And so I've done some work at the intersection of ethics and AI, including a lot of gender bias research in the past to develop more inclusive systems.
Awesome, Sharon.
I'm Sharon Harwett-Hendler, and I have a PhD focused on non-binary gender presentation, as well as being non-binary myself, and worked with Andrea on a project to help create a non-binary text-to-speech voice. And so my focus has been more on the linguistic anthropology side of things, and looking especially at conversational AI, as well as now being part of a large number of queer groups through Twitch, as I am also a streamer.
Awesome. Hey, I think we have a great team here, and everyone has their diverse background and different focuses. So I'm sure we will have wonderful discussing about this very important problem space. So I think we can go ahead to talk about some of those issues and problems and topics we would like to share with the audience and the broader community. I would say it maybe when you want to say something, you could raise your hand, and then we could do that in the order. First of all, I would like to know something about your own background and your research. So what are some of those initial challenges like have you encountered when like conducting your research, like particularly like regarding like how to find, right? Like how to find those eligible participants and existing research to build upon, and how did you overcome and navigate like these challenges? Like maybe we can just go with the order. Oh yes, Michael, Ann, like you can go.
So I think this is a great question because it really is the first stumbling block. I think a lot of people get into this kind of research and they don't realize you're going to actually have to kind of push through some barriers around sampling first. I think the two biggest factors I've seen here are a lack of trust of research and researchers, which is very reasonable, right? I mean, I spend a lot of the time apologizing for what a medical school has done, right, to our communities in the past. The other half of it is that there is a lot of variety within queerness, right? There are a lot of different identities within kind of the queer umbrella, and there is not always good faith between them. There's not always good history between them. So you wind up having to deal with a lot of inter-community conflict as well. These things are not easy to overcome. And a lot of a lot of how I wound up approaching it myself is by taking a much more community focused approach, right? I'm going to spend time in the communities I want to do work with, build that trust the hard way. And it does take time. This is one of the things I tell brand new students all the time. Start working on this now. You want to do a study in 6 months? Get on a bunch of Discords right now, start making friends, or else in 6 months, no one will trust you and you will not have any data. And that will be your fault because you need to build trust. There's no point going in and assuming that people should trust us because honestly, they shouldn't. We represent the institution. We should be a little bit distrusted until we prove ourselves. The other thing I've done is I've tried to adopt participatory methods that have specific room within them for disagreement and processes for resolving that disagreement. And the cool thing is that not only solves research problems, but it solves problems that already existed in our communities, which is kind of it's a good feeling when you can do that and also, get a great paper out of it.
Yeah, like I think that's definitely a very important angle. It's like the trust issue is huge, and especially like when we work with marginalized like communities, because we want to protect them and we don't want to harm them, and we also need to make sure they trust us not to bring those harm like to them by studying them. Yeah, like I would accept, absolutely agree. And Andrea and Sharon, like, do you want to add anything to this?
Sharon is the person who did the recruiting for the Non-Binary Voice Project. Do you want to speak to this?
Yep, I was had my hand up for that. So I had a major advantage here because I am non-binary and we were working with non-binary. So trust, like Michael Ann said, is so huge. And I was already part of a large number of non-binary groups, non-binary academic groups, queer academic groups. So I was able to reach out to these spaces I'm already in and how to, have trust. And being in some of the academic spaces, they were able to in turn reach out to people who they trust. And even so, it was sometimes hard to get as many people as we wanted for this, despite that huge advantage. But really the big thing was being part of the community kind of skipped that whole step because the trust was there. And this was true also when it came out to reaching for other things, including reaching out to the YouTubers we wanted to get data from their public YouTubes. We still wanted to get their permission. And so really, if you can, I'm always going to advocate for having someone who's there as a researcher who's part of the community you're working with. Both, it means they have that chance to say, hey, wait a minute, this is going to be a problem, but also to reach out to the communities they know and be that kind of face. Just, it's really important to still keep that trust and work very hard not to break it, because that will cause a lot of problems in many ways.
Yeah, definitely. Andrea, like anything like else you would like to add? And I say like Michael as like a hand is up too.
I think the only thing that I would say is that the other thing that we did is, like Michael-Ann said, is make sure that we're eliciting feedback throughout the process from the community, so the community has an opportunity to guide the research and to really influence it, as well as being thoughtful about how things are framed. And this is something that I worked with other researchers within Accenture for their own demographics, whether it's working with individuals that have accessibility needs or any other, demographic that is generally marginalized, to ensure that we are being thoughtful about our wording and the way that we're presenting the work, and that we're as inclusive as possible.
Yeah. Michael?
Just one last note to kind of follow up on all of this. I think the other thing that we need to be really careful of here is to practice reflexivity ourselves, even if we're doing in community research. So most of my research is, full member research. And that's actually most of the research I supervise. My grad students tend to do that as well. We're part of the communities we're researching. But I was recently teaching a class on this actually, which is awesome. I never thought I'd get to teach a computer science class about, reflexivity and how to be empathetic towards marginalized populations, but that's where we are now, which is awesome. But one of the things I really try to get across in that class is you've got to remember you still don't understand all of the experiences, even if you're within the community, right? I'm a transgender woman, I'm a lesbian, I'm autistic. I understand a lot of things in the communities that I work with based on that. But I do not know what it is to be a Black trans woman. I do not know what it is to be a bi trans woman, right? I have to take these things into account and seek out other folks who can provide leadership around these, either by adding other researchers to my team, or sometimes even bringing in kind of community consultants who can kind of rise above the level of participant and have a voice in even the research design as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think you make a very important point. It's as researchers, we always need to open to always learn, right? Because there's always something we don't know, especially how to better support those communities. We need to always reflect ourselves and learning from those communities. Great. And Sean?
So just a quick note on that idea of inclusivity is it's also very important to make sure you have your, I guess, inclusive categories correct and to have people you're listening to, because I can tell you, having worked with a number of companies who were trying to expand from being women focused to being marginalized gender focused, continuously made the same mistake. And now a whole bunch of us, despite, they talked to us and then ignored us. And so with one of the groups, we were actually going to be part of a big fundraiser they were doing, and all of us pulled out because we no longer trusted them. So that keeping the trust is so important to make sure you're doing those steps right, and that you listen to those, to the people you're talking to who are from the community, because that's one of the easiest way to immediately destroy trust.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with what we have said. So I think right, first is the trust, and we really need to build this general connections with the communities, and are always have a open mind and to listen to them and reflect on our research practices, and to make sure what we do really align with the trust and their interest. Yeah, that's great. And I would say I probably will only add a little bit about the challenges. Identify not just the participants but also existing research, because I feel right this problem is not just a technical problem, it's also not just a social problem. And if we want to build a technology to support those communities, it's a social technical problem. So what I found is there are a lot of research, but they are scattered around very different domains, because we have LGBTQ studies, and we have psychology studies, and we even have a criminal justice research, and also computer science and HCI. So one challenge I found is if you want to do something really right, and to make sure your technology design would support those community, you really need to draw upon very different bodies of literature and how to gather them and incorporate them like in a holistic way. Like I think that's one of the challenge. But again, like this is what we do, right? Like as researchers, we're trying to build upon this knowledge and to generate like new knowledge. Awesome. So let's talk about something positive because like I think we have discussed a lot of challenges and difficulties to do this type of research. But what are some effective or like unique ways VR or like other like online platforms that have been used to provide LGBTQ plus individuals with support that they are unable to access in real life? So like I think you can speak about this from your own research or your like own personal experience, if appropriate. Yeah, go ahead, Michael Ann.
So one of the big benefits, right, of social technology in general for queer people, I think, but especially for trans people, is that there is very little good healthcare information out there for trans people, very little good health information in general. The average, physician either doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't want the knowledge, or is straight up being malicious. And, I don't necessarily like to malign people, but this is something we've seen over and over again. There's plenty of studies that demonstrate that doctors will actively harm trans people during our medical care, which is, I can tell you firsthand, it's very scary. The counter to this is not coming from the medical system. The counter to this is not coming from anything offline. The counter to this is coming from do-it-yourself hormone websites, trans discords that trade back and forth useful medical information, trade back and forth tips on how to recognize that you are being underdosed, that, you're being sent into menopause at 25 because of, the hormones that they've prescribed to you are ridiculously low doses that are hard to read, again, as anything but malicious, if not uninformed. And the only counterpoint we have to this are these online spaces. The unfortunate thing there is that this stuff tends to get content moderated out as medical misinformation, which is a shame because what it is cultural medical information. And there's a larger problem here, which affects queer and trans people, but also affects all sorts of other marginalized groups, of cultural information being seen as something that needs to be removed from our networks, which is damaging to cultures, is damaging to people's health, and is just demoralizing for all sorts of users. And it's nice to see that some social technology, especially semi-private networks like Discord, the Fediverse, that kind of thing, are resistant to this, can be these places where, because content moderation works differently, we can actually have these discussions, actually have these stores of useful information for anyone who needs them. Of course, you then have the access and visibility problems that come with semi-private networks. That's something my lab is actually actively working on right now. We're very squarely focused on trying to solve that problem if we can. But it's been a really positive thing, even for me in my own transition. I mean, I have needed these groups to double check doctors who, I was lucky, I got well-meaning doctors, but I had to teach them every single thing about being trans. I couldn't have done that without the folks on Discord. It's not the way it should be, but it's awesome to see that social technology is at least a temporary solution to it.
Right, absolutely. Like those like highly critical like medical information, and that's like actually like kind of like the key and to make sure like people know, right? Like what is the procedure, who to trust, like what type of services or treatment they will need, and how to deal with like all of those like very complicated like issues in this process. Great. And Andrea?
Yeah, so for us, at least when we were developing the non-binary text-to-speech voice, one of the surprising use cases that we were super excited about was this AAC users that needed the text-to-speech technology that could then leverage this voice to feel more like themselves. And so this was a really, really exciting opportunity. So providing that variety in text-to-speech systems allows people to really curate their identity, especially when, kind of the cookie cutter standards that we have, in quotes, right, are not really are not really what works for them. It helps counteract dysphoria and other, things that they might already be going through for other reasons as well. And so having that variety, I think was really exciting to see and really helpful in how it could be used in these spaces.
Yeah, that is super cool. Yeah. And Sharon, like you want to add anything to this? Oh, I think you are muted.
There it goes. I'm in a lot of these discords and spaces, and one of the big unfortunate truths right now is that some of the spaces we reached out to let other people know these spaces exist are harder and harder to find safe ones. Twitter was a huge gathering space and reaching out space, for instance, and now we can't even use the word cis, as in cisgender. We can't talk about many of these things. It's much harder to get that connection out there, and there hasn't really been anything that quite works to replace it. There's the Federation type social media, there's Blue Sky, but all of those have many issues. And a lot of these places, and one of the big things that has to be kept in mind is, like Michael Ann mentioned, Black trans women. There's a lot of these places that Black people feel extremely unwelcome because there's a lot of anti-Blackness in a lot of queer communities, and even more so in a lot of these social spaces where we pass information, let each other know we exist. Excuse me. But at the same time, those are some of the best places where we get to say, hey, this is who we are, and see others like us. Similarly, when you go to live streaming platforms, and again, there's so many issues of safety with those. I could talk about that for way longer than we have, so I'll just leave that part there. But being able to see other people on your screen talking about these identities and then ask in chat about, wait, where can we find more, has been extremely valuable. And I've also, over the 3.5 years I've been active there, have also seen an explosion of identities and people being out about their identities. And it's that snowball effect of a few people are loud and proud and other people go, oh, I can do that too. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses here. And again, there's just that issue of, we have a lot of safe spaces. How do we let other people know they exist? And the thing I'm, don't really have an answer for right now.
Right. Yeah, like absolutely. Like I can definitely say there are some tensions, right? Because like with those online platforms, you will be able to access a lot of more people, but that also means a lot of people would know you, and then they like that would lead to a lot of like privacy and safety issues, and which we are actually like going to talk about that like later, like at this panel. Like Andrea, like you would like to add anything to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say very briefly that while, in-person meetups can be really valuable because they can hold space for certain communities, especially ones that, are marginalized. So there's a lot of like BIPOC meetups, for example, that are popping up with these intersectional identities, which is absolutely great, right? And can create at least a mini bubble of a safe space for a small group of individuals. Not everybody has access to those, right? Either from the perspective of being able to travel, right? Doesn't have a car, doesn't have access to public transit or whatever else, or lives in a more rural area. So having some of these online spaces, if they can learn about them and get into them, allows them to tap into some of those same community resources and safe spaces that you otherwise may not have access to, or may only have access to very infrequently. So I think that, these spaces are absolutely critical to create some level of safety and information exchange.
Yeah. Definitely. And I would like also add a little bit about like VR, like because I mainly work on like VR, like what we found is like very similar to like what like all of you have mentioned. So like for the LGBTQ individuals like who cannot access like to those like very important information in their real life, either because they live in a like small village or they don't have connections like with other LGBTQ individuals. They like to like leverage like social virtual reality to meet with others and getting like all of this informational support, as we just mentioned, and network support because you would know each other and you would share information like about how to do the procedures and how to deal with those problems. They also get esteem support because they mentioned that they got more confident about themselves, like because they know like there are some other people like them out there, and they would talk with them and share knowledge. And one thing I found like especially like interesting in like social virtual reality is they talked about emotional support, but it's in a very embodied way. So kind of like on those online platforms like Twitter or like live streaming, you cannot really hug people. Like you can send an emoji like of hugging, but it's not really hugging. So they really like this embodied and physicalized type of support, and they could get it in like virtual reality. So like one of our work, like people told us they would cry on each other's shoulders, or hug each other, or like shake hands, like those type of support, like they feel they could get like online like, without actually traveling to somewhere. So like as like all of you have mentioned. So what about opportunities to like creatively express and explore their identities? Because I feel like that is also a kind of like a key question for a lot of those populations, because they want to understand their identity and build their identity, but especially for younger people, right, or teens, they probably are confused. So like, what do you think those online platforms would help them like about this? Maybe we go with Michael and first too.
I mean, absolutely. So this is one of those things where social technology is kind of picking up the slack from what we've done to our world. There was a brief moment where you could do a lot of identity play in offline spaces, right? You could figure yourself out. Identity play is a key part of anyone's psychological development. You have to play with a bunch of things before you do the actual identity work to figure out exactly who you are and kind of claim it publicly. If you don't do the identity play first, it's psychologically unhealthy and is going to wind up with a lot of backtracking, a lot of confusion, honestly. And you used to be able to, for, like maybe a good 7 to 10 year chunk, you could do more of that offline. You can't anymore. A lot of places have cracked back down. We have backslid, at least in the United States, but it's my understanding elsewhere as well. We have backslid quite a bit. So often these online spaces are all we have left for identity play. The nice thing is we have better tools for identity play than we ever had before. I've seen people use technology that was intended to help people manage alters and that kind of thing, turn that on Discords to actually explore multiple identities while keeping kind of a unified communication setup for themselves. And while I'm not really a virtual reality person myself, unfortunately, I put the headset on and I get nauseous immediately. I have seen VTubers go through a ton of identity work that winds up with them being very happy, healthy adults who know who they are and can operate based on that. And these are folks that I know personally live in places where that would have at best resulted in them getting, beat up at school, that kind of thing. They just couldn't do that offline. And we have these amazing tools for them now. And that genuinely provides me hope.
Yeah, I did. I think like I have seen a lot of positive cases like that too. And also like I think the like, online like environment is also low cost and low risk, because like again like we would really like to have those like real life like in person like opportunities, but for some of those individuals they probably it's like it's more convenient for me to just go online and try different things. And then yeah, and I don't even need to leave my house, so it's kind of like low cost and it's very easy like for them. Andrea and Sharon, like anything else you want to add here?
Sorry. Took me a moment to get myself off mute again. Yeah, seeing VTubers in live streams, and getting to watch people talk things through in some of our private spaces, and talk things through in more public spaces, like again with live streaming, because that's my main focus right now. I got to watch a friend try on a binder for the first time ever, and go from that to getting hormones, to getting top surgery, to actively now being a huge advocate for trans men. He's absolutely amazing. But that all started with that group of people there to give the support online and go, yes, that looks great. Yes, we are here to support you as you go through this. So yeah.
Yeah, so like I think it's overall like positive, right? And it's beneficial people. Andrea, like anything else you would like to add? No. Okay. All right, and like I think I would just add a little bit just based on my like research on like VR. So like I know Michael, I like you don't like to try it, but I feel like one benefit like people have mentioned is you could really wear a body in VR. So it's very different than just right like looking at the screen and say like you have an avatar and then just like on screen. But in VR it's more like immersive, and then they have the body tracking. Like features, like that means you actually need to move your body offline like, in order to move it in VR. So like sometimes people feel like that gives them a more like unique experience about the body. So it's to help them like better identify with the kind of like sexual and gender identity. Like some of them like even told us like this experience is so powerful that helps them to actually decide to go through the like transition procedure like offline, like because they feel like I just identify so much more like with this body, like because I tried it in VR and I see how my body moves and how my like hip moves, so like I feel like I feel more comfortable about this body. So like I think for some of them they use this as an experiment and just to say if I identify this body more or not, and then they can decide like what they're going to do like offline. So yeah, like I think I was very like impressed like when I heard those type of stories, because I feel wow, like that's like that means technology can really help people like to better explore their like identities in a more realistic way. Cool. So like I think we have talked quite a lot, and we do think like those online platforms, right, like would help people to find the support and information they're unable to access in real life. But we also mentioned some of those limitations and risks. So what are your suggestions about how can we design like future like technologies to right better like encourage community building and mutual learning like for those individuals and who lack access to like necessary information, knowledge, and resources for understanding and building their identities? Because like based on what I have heard, like I feel like we agree like those technology help, but it's not enough. So like how can we make them better? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, might notice I'm tearing up a little bit because that idea of being able to try, in a sense, try on a body and see how it feels is so powerful. And like that just existing and knowing that, similarly having someone reach out to us and going or respond to our survey with, this is the first time I found a voice that I feel like could represent me. Normally I only type because all the voices are too binary. So that's, you know, something very special and near to my heart. But excuse me. Besides those programs being, you know, more widespread, more accessible, not acceptable, really is huge. And again, just working with people, and this is going to be the main thread of what I say over the course of this, working with people who are in those places is a huge one. Having people there to make sure you're not only doing it right, but then who can reach out to the communities and help make it spread, reach out to the I hate using the word influencer, but I'm not coming up with a better one right now. You can do that. And there are groups out there that exist, like the It Gets Better Project, where a lot of them unfortunately are like completely volunteer or donation funded. And so finding the ways to, in a sense, merge how those work with some of the tech work that's being built, and hopefully getting them more resources and money in the process can really be a very large thing. Wrong button.
Yeah, I think, right, like the point is making it more accessible, right? Because we mentioned like information and resources and make sure people know about those and could access it, like, which is a great point, because like especially when I said like a VR, and I really feel like it's a privilege. It's really a privilege to like certain people. It's like you need to know this exists, you need to afford the headset, then you know where to find those people, right? Like where to find those resources, and not everyone knows. So like how can we make like equal access to this technology and support and to the LGBTQ like communities, like that would be very important, right? And anyone else would like to add anything to this? Yeah, Michael Ann?
Yeah, so I'm going to say something that I think is still kind of radical for a computer science context. We need to earn scale. We can't just always have it as our goal. We need to earn it, and we have not earned it with the vast majority of our systems, because scale is the direct enemy of context, and context is what keeps marginalized people safe in these systems. Context enough to understand that this is an attack and not just a friendly discussion. Context enough to understand that one of our replies is, don't be transphobic, not an invitation to invite more transphobes who are going to do things like the thing we're replying to. Right? Context is what makes it so things that are terms of endearment between queer people, but slurs from the outside are not moderated away in the wrong circumstances and left up in other wrong circumstances, right? And all of this is stuff that fights directly against scale, because the more you scale, the less detail you can have, the less nuance you can capture with the systems. And our instinct in computer science broadly is to scale, 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 because that is where the money comes from. I understand that we live in a capitalist society. I understand that at some point funders and industry want to see something profitable, but we need to go to a system where we earn that. Making money off a system that scales but makes a lot of people's lives worse as it scales is unethical. And it is something that, honestly, I'm really hoping bodies like the FTC start slapping huge fines on companies for, because it needs to stop. We need to earn scale. I mean, this is something I've been saying since I was a first-year grad student. It is not something that we can actually protect people with if it is our only goal to scale and scale and scale, because it cuts against every protective goal we have.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because if you think about like now, like a lot of those business models, right, like to try to sell more things and to more people, or like that means like you just make everything like more generic, like or Office One like type of design. But as we just mentioned, for like a lot of those like communities, they have very unique needs and risks, and they need very specific context and knowledge and design to protect them. But sometimes people feel, well, like this doesn't scale, right? So we don't want to do it, but that's not the way to do things, right? Andrea?
Yeah, so I think, along those same lines and along the lines of the previous answer that I gave, creating safe spaces for people and safe communities also means that you need to some degree, keep people out, right? And I think that that's extremely important. Again, with the example of BIPOC communities that are meeting in person, right? If I'm as a non-BIPOC person, if I am not explicitly invited by the community to come in, I don't belong in that space, right? Because that's their space. That's the space that's safe for them, right? To work through and to get support for the challenges or the camaraderie or whatever they're looking for, right? It is not for me to decide to be in that space. And I think that means there's a couple of things that need to happen for that to be to continue to exist. One is that people need to understand that exclusion out of some of these spaces is a critical piece of being an ally and being thoughtful about other people's needs, right? Exclusion has to exist in some of these cases. And I think that some people get very upset by being excluded from these spaces. And I think that we just need to be able to create and facilitate that. And so it's an interesting challenge, I think, because one is that you want the right people to know that these communities exist, that these spaces exist, whether they be physical or virtual. But at the same time, you want to protect those spaces from individuals or communities that don't necessarily belong there to maintain that safety.
Right. Like, I think that's a great point. Like, especially we just mentioned like how to make those more accessible, right? But so it's not just accessible to a lot of people. You also want to make it safe. So like that means it cannot be. It's like harassers or like other people can just access it at any time. So like there has to be a balance like between this. But I say Sharon has like something to add.
Yeah. Excuse me. So speaking about that, the exclusivity aspect of it is really, really important, especially because number one, speaking of scale, and inclusivity, as you try to scale for more and more people being included, oftentimes you lose that group of people who you meant to focus on in the beginning. And even if you only have people who actively mean well in a space, if it drowns out that group that it was started for, that's a big problem. And like I mentioned, a bunch of groups trying to go from women focused to full out marginalized gender focused and failing miserably at that. It's fine to have women only spaces as long as those women only spaces include trans women. Very important there. But and similarly, I'd love to see more non-binary focused spaces, trans masculine focused spaces. A lot of the focus because so much focus has been on women, it has been a really hard push. And a lot of things have to be created really from scratch rather than trying to adjust already existing location or groups. But one of the other ones is that I think I hear way more outside of our communities the idea of no politics rules being good. And the moment you have something of that sort, number one, if nobody talks about it, you end up with a bunch of bigots who just, you don't know that that's who they are. But also our lives have become politicized. There's so many things as soon as you try to make a space, no politics, like queerness is politicized, race is politicized, all of these things. And so making sure that you have the right set of rules. So like no bigotry rules versus no politics rules, which really helps cultivate that group. And just mods, having the people also there to just be willing to go, no, we need you out. And
yeah,
protect
so like
spaces.
I think that actually like relates very well like to our next question. So like we want to talk about like privacy and safety because like sounds like this comes out a lot. So like how can like online platforms better support the LGBTQ like community against like those harassment and homophobia and transphobia and or like any type of hate, and how could developers ensure like protection like in this users data from both online and offline targeting? Yeah, sure. And Michael Ann?
There you go. Tools for us to manage our spaces is one of those really big things, giving us the tools. In many spaces I've been in, everything's third party when it comes to safety. And those things shouldn't be third party. And when those platforms have someone who's created a great tool, maybe, talk to them and incorporate that tool rather than keeping it in that third party state that oftentimes as things change or stuff happens, it doesn't work as well. But that's really one of the biggest ones, is making sure you give that community the tools. The tools to block, the tools to ban, the tools to like ban an IP rather than just ban one single address. On Twitch, there's a thing called hate raids and follow bots, which is, someone will come into a marginalized community, marginalized streamer, and either bring a huge number of people to yell abuse at them, or just you get suddenly new follow, new follow, new follow, new follow, from people who have basically created huge numbers of bots, and it can be a mess to deal with. And if the tools didn't exist, like trying to clean that out would be a huge problem. Speaking as someone who once had, I think 5 follow bots in one session, like sets of them. So I think double-digit thousands. And a lot of places, that if they think that you're artificially increasing your numbers, will blame you rather than looking at where those numbers came from. Did you have anything to do with it? So just really that listening, seeing if something is created, making sure that it's included as you go forward, and give us those tools.
Yeah, because like I feel like right now there's so many more nuanced ways, right? Like to attack people and to harass people. Like maybe like someone has never thought about, like their tools, it could be abused to attack people, like rather than being useful. So like I think we do need better like safety tools and to like protect people from those more like nuanced forms like of harassment, like rather than just like saying something crazy, like to people.
Also, really quick, let us use names that aren't necessarily our legal ID names. Both, like, which is a thing that Facebook had that change go on. And that means, number one, if you're trans and you've taken on a new name, but it's not directly what's on your ID, that can cause problems. Similarly, if you need to use another name for safety, either so that your family doesn't find it, or so that you don't get doxxed and get hate, outside of online. That it's just a really important thing to include, is that ability to choose a name rather than having to use a legal name.
You're right.
And I keep raising my hand when I mean to mute.
Michael, Ann, like you would like to add something to this because your hands was up.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I heartily agree with all of that, 100% on the same page. I think that something that companies can and need to do kind of on their side of things, it actually isn't technical at all. They need to reconceptualize what their products actually are, because a product is what it does, not what you intended it to do. Like, I'm sorry, you had intents, but then you build a thing, and then it's not under your control anymore. You built it, it does what it does, and if you wanted it to do something else, you should have built it differently. A lot of times companies still insist, like you think of something like Twitter, which is, the only thing in the world that I'm willing to dead name. You can think of something like Twitter, right? That was intended to be an ad serving and content serving platform to make money for a group of tech bros. Well, I'm sorry, but you built a standardized community space for the entire world, and you can't keep pretending that it's not that. You have to operate with the understanding of what your technology has actually become. And that changes the game on all sorts of things. Upgrades cannot be just what's more efficient or what the staff of a company thinks would be cool to add, because you are messing with the underlying technology that an entire community deals with, right? You need to consult with the user communities actually on, will this upgrade actually help? Will this upgrade break everything? Do we need additional training around this upgrade? Because what seems efficient from a computational point of view is rarely what is understandable and useful from a human point of view. These things often, go against each other. And when you take away a feature, you might accidentally be taking away a key security mechanisms that's not used how you intended. But again, a thing is what it does. So you have to deal with it on that basis. You have to recognize that, okay, well, this actually is a security system. So I can't just pull it out because I don't think it's a cool feature anymore. There is a callous attitude sometimes on the part of these platform companies that makes it think, it makes many of us think that they don't see the value in their own platforms. They don't understand what they've created, or they're willfully misunderstanding what they created to make more money from it. And you can't keep doing that. You have to treat it as what it is. And that is going to mean moving slower. That is going to mean a lot more double checking and a lot more communication before you change a damn thing. And it is probably going to mean a lot of committing training and communication resources when you do make changes. My dissertation was actually all about how marginalized people deal with changes in social platforms and how they deal with their privacy, security, and visibility concerns there. And it is a moral imperative to get better at doing this, to get better at including communities when you change things, when you upgrade things, and scoping what an upgrade actually is. But for those who need a capitalist reason to do something, this is also a major point where platforms bleed users, right? There are changes which just lead to these massive platform abandonments. And the way you avoid those is, again, talking to your users, dealing with it on their terms, instead of just assuming that, we don't really care about this product anymore, or, oh, wouldn't this be cool? And I love it. Part of why I love being a computer scientist is because we get to ask that question of, wouldn't this be cool? But we have to have an additional step of, would it be cool if we deployed it across the world and affected thousands of people? And we need to consult with them instead of just guessing. I guess what I'm really saying here is we need to talk to people more. This is the hardest thing I have to teach my computer science students. You need to go talk to people because it's going to impact those people. And then that can be, that can be awkward sometimes. That can be uncomfortable sometimes. Not everybody likes going out and doing that user-facing work. But if you want to make big changes in the world that are going to affect a lot of people, there's no getting around it. And you can get training on it. You can work on it. Like, anyone can do this. Anyone can do user-facing work. You just have to commit to it. And you have to be willing to take some risks, put yourself out there, which is hard, but worth doing.
Oh yeah, like I cannot agree more with what you said, because like I think we have talked about trust issues like at the beginning, but right, like there's also trust issues between the users and the platform, or the technology designers. So if they don't trust your platform, they don't trust your features, they wouldn't use it. So it's very important to build this trust. Because from like our research, like we also found something kind of like women, like social media users, they say, I don't trust the male developers to develop those harassment mitigation features because they wouldn't understand my problem. So it's like, how can we build this trust? Like between those two groups is, as you said, we need to talk to people more and to better understand their needs and to build something that would really help them, rather than, as you said, I think this is what they need, while it's absolutely not what they need, right? Yeah, Andrea, like, would you like to add something like to this? And then like we're going to move to Q&A like from the audience.
Sure. Yeah, so definitely user-centered design or human-centered design is a critical component of this. I absolutely agree. I think the other thing that we need to consider is how we do content moderation, right? Because, I mean, we touched on this very, very briefly, but I think that paying a bunch of people very little money to go through very hard content with a rubric that is very superficially put together does not breed success, right? And I think that, and my big concern, honestly, is that with now the focus on Gen AI, that now we're going to attempt to use that to do content moderation when we very well know that Gen AI models have been built with pre-existing biases straight into them that harm the exact same groups that, need the most protection. So I think that thinking as we move forward to how do we do this thoughtfully? How do we do this well? How do we build, if we're relying on technology, how do we build the models to get us the right answer, right? To get us the ethical answer, not the answer that we've had in the past, is absolutely critical. And to value the people that are doing the content moderation, to give them the autonomy and the critical thinking and the flexibility to look at the context in which these things are happening, to create these spaces, I think is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, like, I think you may want to add to this.
Yeah, just to briefly build on that. So I recently was a panelist at the Social Media Moderation Summit, and this came up a ton. And I'll admit, I probably spend far too much of my personal time thinking about content moderation constantly, because I think it is one of the biggest issues we're dealing with right now. Something that came out at the summit that I absolutely love is the notion that we need to completely flip the script on what a human content moderator is, right? Right now, they are low-paid distributed positions that really don't get any respect internally or externally. And you basically get very little pay to sit there and look at all the worst things on the internet all day, which is psychologically damaging a lot of the time. If we're going to be asking people to do that, we need to make it a prestige position. It needs to be something that is highly visible. It needs to be something that pays well. And we need to reframe it not as you are dealing with the dirty little secrets of the platform, but rather you are the guardian of truth. You are the guardian of decency on these platforms, right? These should be some of the star positions at any given tech company that has any sort of public-facing platform, and they should be celebrated because the people doing human content moderation work, honestly, if there's heroes in this, it's them. It's absolutely them, and we need to spotlight them for that as best we can. And I'm actually seeing evidence in work from my lab that this is something that will have a really, really positive impact. We recently did a study of how people deal with content moderation and curation within the Fediverse. And the thing that came up over and over again, good content moderation is mutual aid, is community care, in the same way that straight up giving people the money they need for basic necessities is at that level. We can take that energy, that understanding, and use it as a way to completely change what content moderators are. That's my hope. That's the work that some of the work we're doing in my lab right now. And I think it's really promising because the content moderation problem is not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. And AI is most certainly not the solution.
Yeah, I just feel like, right, like now we ask a lot like from the like volunteer like moderators, but we didn't give them anything back, right? And so it's like we require them to do a lot of emotional labor and to deal with those harassing and damaging like content, but you're like, you are the volunteer, right? Like you just do this. But there's no, right? Like there's no like incentives and we don't like recognize their work. So like we definitely should do better for that. Well, I wish we have another 5 hours and we could keep talking for for the whole day. But like, I think it's almost the time. But we will have time for like maybe one question, like from the audience, like which I think would be great and to wrap up like today's panel, because this question is really about like going back to what we said. Trust is really the key, and right, like we also want to build allies. So like the question is, how would you recommend someone outside of the LGBTQ community to approach and build trust with participants if you are doing a research study? Yeah, and I think like maybe we can go in line like to answer this so like everyone can say something. Michael, like you want to go ahead?
So this is an answer I've given before, and it's one of the few answers I've been booed for. But I do think it's true. I come from the school of nothing about us without us, and I am strict on that. If you want to study a community you are not part of, the first thing you need to do is really ask yourself, why am I the right person? And a lot of the time, even if you are very well-meaning, even if you have all the right motivations, the answer to that second question is going to be no. That doesn't mean you can't engage in the research. It might just mean you can't lead it or you can't do it solo. Because I guarantee you, if you're a professor and you have colleagues, if you're a grad student and you have other people in your program, there are queer people around who you could should partner with, or maybe even hand first authorship off to, because maybe they should be leading the project, right? You need to partner with people, and you need to be really serious about interrogating your own motivations for doing it, because honestly, people will smell the wrong motivations on you. It will be a self-defeating thing. So really think about, why am I doing this? And are there people that it would be better to partner with to do this? Because in-community knowledge is really useful.
Absolutely. Andrea?
Yeah, I'll second that. Bring the people in that are part of the community to help you with the research, right? Making sure that, like I said before, you're communicating with the community appropriately, using the language that they're going to most relate to. You're not going to know how to do that, right? As someone that's an outsider. So I think it's important to go ahead and bring people in that are part of that community and to build those relationships with that community in order to do that research effectively.
Sharon?
Besides echoing completely what they both said, because I am also very nothing for us without us, and bring in other people. Like I'm one of my biggest things right now is, if you're working with tech, make sure you have non-tech people in your team. Make sure you bring in the cultural experts, the people with lived experience, the people trained in DEI, the anthropologists or linguists or whichever, soft science fits what you're doing. And in a lot of cases, if you look at the research that exists and you reach out to some of those people who've done the research and said, hey, I'm doing this thing, would you like to be involved? That's huge, and it's part of how I got involved with my research and actually figured out who I am was reaching out to to a linguist doing some of the work I wanted to do, and him going, hey, have you heard about this conference? You should come to this. And it changed my perspective on everything, being able to be in a conference specifically focused on nothing for us without us, in this case queerness and language. So excuse me. Absolutely do that research, find the people in the communities, and work with us.
Yeah, I would say like I cannot agree more with all of you. Like what you just said is definitely right. Like build the connection, like find the insider, like that would lead you like to do this type of research. I would also like to add, it's like we need to be a good ally. Like that means be humble. Like that means you probably don't understand that community. Like you don't have the knowledge because you don't have the same experience. So be open and be humble to learn from them. Like rather than saying like something like, I think this is your problem, so like this is how we will help you. No, like you let them to tell you like what the problem is and to share the experience and to go from there. So like I think that's like my own thoughts on that, but like I think we're right on time. So like thank you everyone for like this wonderful discussing. Like again, like I feel like we could do this all day, and I hope we could have a chance to and then continue this conversation. But I just want to ask like our wonderful ACM host, like do you want to like say something to wrap up like today's panel?
Yes. Wait, am I thinking? Okay. So again, thank you to the panelists and the moderators. Thank you all to like the attendees for coming. I feel like this conversation is really important to have, especially in Pride Month and considering all the things currently going on in the US specifically. And this is just, again, thank you for everyone and for this great conversation. And since we're at time, we sadly have to end this. So just want to say goodbye and thank you.
And thank you all, and especially thank you like ACM for like hosting this, because like I think this is a very important message like to the community, like to show we actually care. Yeah. All right, great. Thank you. Bye bye.